Hi everyone, we're just going to wait a minute to let more folks in before we officially get started, maybe in like a minute or two. Okay, it stopped climbing. More people can join as we go. Let me get my window situated. All right, hi everyone, I'm Kellen Warner. I'm a project manager for the South Coast region at the Conservancy, and I'm the Community Wetland Grant Program Manager.
And hi, everyone. My name is Nina Monk. I am a 2026 California Sea Grant State Fellow working in the South Coast at the State Coastal Conservancy.
I also want to shout out that joining us online today is Katie Nichols, who's another South Coast project manager at the Conservancy, and she's the manager of the Southern California Wetlands Recovery Project. And she'll be the one putting links in the chat when we reference them during the presentation. So thank you very much, Katie. All right, so in today's webinar, we're going to provide an overview of the Southern California Wetland Restoration Project's Community Wetland Restoration Grant Program, which is quite a mouthful. So you'll often hear us refer to it simply as CWRGP or QWERG. And today we'll be discussing a little bit about the background of QWERG and also the 2026 grant round details. And we'll go over the application guidelines, the application template, and the selection criteria, as well as a little bit about what you can expect if your project is selected for funding. We're going to address questions regarding the application and anything else we've discussed at the end during the Q&A section. But please feel free to put questions in the chat box as they come up throughout the webinar. I think that's working, hopefully. And then we'll also answer them in the end when we're done with the formal presentation. Okay, last logistic thing, this webinar is being recorded and it's going to be posted on the Conservancy's YouTube page and linked on the WRP website. And we can also share the slides too. Okay, good. So this map shows the geographic extent of the Southern California Wetlands Recovery Project region, which stretches along the coast from the US-Mexico border up to Point Conception in the Santa Barbara subregion. Each coastal wetland is indicated by a red dot, and non-tidal wetlands are shown as individual blue dots. Projects for CWRGP have been funded throughout the region, including out on the Channel Islands. And the Southern California Wetlands Recovery Project, or WRP for short, manages the Community Wetlands Restoration Grant Program. The WRP is a partnership of 18 state and federal agencies, chaired by the California Natural Resources Agency and supported by the Coastal Conservancy. Through the WRP partnership, public agencies, scientists, and local communities work cooperatively to support and facilitate acquisition, enhancement, and restoration of wetlands in coastal Southern California. The 2018 WRP Regional Strategy is a document that articulates long-term goals and specific implementation strategies to help guide wetland restoration for the WRP over the next few decades in order to improve wetland resilience to climate change and other stressors. The regional strategy guides agencies in setting goals, as well as providing quantitative objectives and management strategies for meeting each of these goals. These goals are to preserve and restore resilient coastal tidal wetlands and associated marine and terrestrial habitats, to preserve and restore streams, adjacent habitats, and other non-tidal wetland ecosystems to support healthy watersheds. Goal 3 is to support education and compatible access related to coastal wetlands and watersheds. And 4 is to advance the science of wetland restoration and management in Southern California. CWRGP supports achieving all of these goals, or can, as it is a restoration program and can be used to advance restoration science. But in particular, it addresses Goal 3 by supporting community-based restoration projects. And since 2001, the CWRGP has provided over $4 million in funding to over 180 community-based restoration projects. Historically, this program has been funded by a variety of agencies and organizations. This year, it will be administered and funded by the State Coastal Conservancy, and our source of funding is from Prop 4, which is the 2024 Climate Bond. And we have 4 program priorities. The first is to engage CWRGP priority communities to restore or enhance coastal wetlands and coastal stream corridors. The second is to implement restoration projects that have strong community benefits, such as community engagement, education, workforce development, career development, and leadership development. The third priority is to demonstrate community-led planning and implementation of habitat restoration projects that are anchored in community expertise. Examples of this can include community leaders, community-based organizations, tribal members, local planners, or local and state government officials. And then the fourth is to increase organizational capacity to plan and implement habitat restoration projects. Projects selected in 2026 must provide meaningful and direct benefits to people and communities that have historically faced systemic barriers resulting in limited access to natural resources and other systemically excluded communities. We'll bring up this definition again and give more context and tools when we get into this year's application. So now let's focus on the 2026 grant cycle. For project duration, the expectation is that the projects will be a maximum of 3 years. Project start date is tentatively spring or summer of 2027, and the project should be completed by 2030. Approximately $300,000 will be available for this grant round, and applicants may request a grant amount of up to $100,000. Previous awards ranged between $30,000 and $100,000, and we anticipate that 3 to 5 projects will be selected. If you're interested in applying for this grant cycle, these are the important dates to remember. Please note that this is the proposed schedule, and none of the dates besides the due date are set in stone yet. So applications are due August 1st by 5 p.m., after which there'll be an application review by the selection committee. In September, provisional notifications of awards or denials will be sent to applicants. In December, selected project proposals will be presented to the Coastal Conservancy Board for funding approval. In the winter of 2027, following board approval, the Coastal Conservancy will enter into grant agreements and develop work programs with the selected applicants. And spring, summer 2027, the funding will be all set up and ready and projects can begin. Okay, for eligible applicants, it includes 501c3 nonprofit organizations or other community-based organizations with a 501c3 fiscal sponsor. If you have questions about that, please let us know. 2 projects that were selected last year have fiscal sponsors. So we've just gone through it, so we have answers. Also eligible are federally recognized tribes and non-federally recognized tribes with a 501c3 fiscal sponsor. Local government agencies, city or county, and other public agencies, and public or nonprofit universities. Proposals demonstrating partnerships between more than one community-based organization and or local public agency will be prioritized. To be eligible for funding, projects must do 3 things. The first is to restore wetlands or wetland-associated habitats. Number 2 is to involve the community in the restoration implementation. And 3 is to include an educational component. Eligible habitats include coastal wetlands, shallow subtidal habitats, streams, rivers, wetland adjacent riparian habitat, depressional wetlands, and transition upland habitat adjacent to wetlands. If you're proposing to restore transitional habitat that is adjacent to a wetland, please just be sure to explain the transitional zone wetland connection in your application. Eligible activities include, but are not limited to, removing invasive plant species, trash, debris, and other pollutants, installing and maintaining native trees, plants, and shrubs, developing and installing trails and interpreted elements that support habitat restoration, and installing bioswales, mulch, or other features that encourage water infiltration. Additional activities that can be supported by this program, so long as they're directly related to a specific identifiable restoration project, include things such as project development and planning, and organizational capacity building. For example, internal training, staffing, support, and workforce development, like career and leadership development. Some other things to keep in mind is that we will award no more than one grant per applicant. So if you're choosing between a couple of projects that you think fit this funding source, please let us know and we can help you determine which one is going to be more competitive. Applicants will need to provide proof of that the landowner is on board for the project. So if you don't own the land that you plan to work on, make sure you get permission from the landowner to do the work. Written permission that we will keep on file. And then grant recipients will be required to enter into a 5, 10, or 15-year grant agreement to ensure long-term project protection of the project site, so that places that are restored stay restored. This is going to be dependent on your projects, and we'll work with you to right-size the correct grant agreement term for your project. We can't fund with this funding source solely experimental or research projects, solely construction projects, solely recreational activities, ongoing monitoring and maintenance projects. The caveat for that one is that we can pay for monitoring and maintenance if it's specifically tied to the restoration project, where monitoring is necessary to ensure project success and it's completed within the duration of the project. So now I'm going to throw it over to Nina.
Thanks, Kellen. Yes, so we wanted to share a few projects that have been previously funded as examples that you may draw inspiration from as you prepare your proposals. This project is called Restoring the Buena Vista Lagoon Ecological Reserve with Payam Kwitcham Ecological Knowledge. The Buena Vista Lagoon is between Oceanside and Carlsbad in San Diego County. And the purpose of this project is to form a collaboration between the San Luis Rey Band of Mission Indians, represented in this project by their foundation, Atahum Poquam, which is a Native American-led and serving organization, Buena Vista Audubon Society, and Audubon California, to plan and implement restoration activities within the Buena Vista Lagoon Ecological Reserve that is directly informed by and includes traditional ecological knowledge. This project is helping reconnect the Payam Kwitcham to their land, reclaim their stories, and ensure that they play a leading role in shaping the future of their ancestral land and ongoing projects currently in the planning stage at Buena Vista Lagoon. This proposal was submitted by California Audubon, who is the primary grantee, but the award is split amongst partners as sub-awardees. Further up the coast, this project was previously funded in Malibu, and it's called the Malibu Creek Riparian Restoration. And its primary goal was restoration of riparian and coastal stream corridor habitat along Malibu Creek. The opportunity for community involvement in riparian restoration activities was targeted for underemployed individuals in the community, which is a part of a larger educational workforce development training that was in partnership with state parks staff at Malibu State Park. This project is a great example of targeting underserved community members, in this case, underemployed adults, in restoration and educational opportunities to deliver direct benefits to the community. Even further up the coast in the city of Port Hueneme, this project example that was successfully funded last year is called Hueneme Beach Park Community Dune Restoration. The primary goal of this project is the restoration of coastal dune habitat, and it is adjacent to a large wetland complex called Ormond Beach Wetlands. The community is involved in the project through volunteer opportunities to remove invasive plants, install sand and symbolic fencing, and plant native plant species. The educational component of this project is delivered through stewardship days offered to local schools and tribal youth to visit the site and learn about the project. They also are developing educational signage about the dune ecosystem to be installed at the site. This project is a great example where they connected the importance of restoring dune habitat for wetland-associated species. Examples of project types and activities are provided in the application guidance document, which we'll go over. But however, these examples are not fully inclusive. So if you're wondering if your project type is eligible, please feel free to schedule a consultation with us, and we'd love to talk about it with you more. I'm going to hand it back over to Kellen now.
Sorry, I muted myself. Okay, the next few things we're going to go over are the selection criteria. There are 6 of them. So as you're developing your project, we'll be using these criteria to evaluate applications. So it would behoove you to pay attention to this and utilize this when you're coming up with your projects. The first is restoration. So this is the extent to which the project will restore an eligible habitat type. Number 2 is our extent to which the project meaningfully engages priority communities in hands-on restoration activities. Community benefits, the degree to which the project implements restoration projects that have strong community benefits, such as community engagement, education, workforce development, career development, and leadership development. Extent to which the project demonstrates community-led planning and implementation of desired projects that are anchored in community expertise. The degree to which the project will help build the applicant's capacity to plan and implement wetland restoration projects and or increase community engagement in wetland restoration projects. And applicant experience and capacity to implement the project and provide required long-term protection agreements. All right, back to you, Nina.
Thanks, Kellen. So now we're going to spend some time on the actual grant application. And we have 2 important resources for you to use as you develop your proposal. These are the application guidance document and the application template. Both of these can be found on the webpage written out, that the URL that's at the top of the slide. And Katie is also going to send this link in the chat. When you get to this webpage, you will see this image that's on the left side of the slide that says Request for Proposals is open. If you scroll down, you will see the how to apply section, and below that is where the guidance document and template are available to download. The guidance document is meant to provide more detailed information and complement the application template. So I highly encourage applicants to read through the guidance before beginning to fill out the template. It's a document that we update yearly. When you begin to fill out the application template, you'll notice that it is composed of 4 sections: an application cover page, a project narrative, project budget, and attachments. A complete application that is ready to submit will have all 4 of these sections filled out. And we're going to go over each of these sections in a bit more detail in the next few slides. Keep in mind that the template itself has instructions written out for each of these sections that will help you complete it. The application cover page asks for contact information, basic information about the project, including contact information, general project information, location information, and elected officials in your district. Under location information, we ask you if your project is in or near a disadvantaged community, and if it is in or near a severely disadvantaged community. And we have linked a mapping tool on the template for you to use to assess this, that we will also be using to assess your project. And I'm going to go over a bit more about CWRGP priority communities now. So our funding source, which is the Prop 4 Climate Bond, has specific definitions for disadvantaged and severely disadvantaged communities and vulnerable populations that we are adopting for CWRGP priority communities. And these are based on quantifiable factors such as income and vulnerability to climate hazards like extreme heat and flood, sea level rise, drought, wildfire. So to go over the specific definitions, a disadvantaged community, which we also refer to as DAC, is defined as a community with a median household income of less than 80% of that area average or less than 80% of statewide median household income. A severely disadvantaged community, which we call SDAC for short, is defined as a community with a median household income of less than 60% of the area average or less than 60% of statewide median household income. And vulnerable population is a subgroup of population within a region or community that faces a disproportionately heightened risk or increased sensitivity to impacts of climate change, and that lacks adequate resources to cope with, adapt to, or recover from such impacts. And in the context of this funding source, tribes are automatically considered vulnerable populations. So there are two tools that are available for you to evaluate whether your project will provide meaningful and direct benefits to CWRGP priority communities. The selection committee will also use these tools in the evaluation of your project. The first tool is the Prop 4 DAC SDAC tool. And the second tool is the Vulnerable Communities Platform Climate Vulnerability Map, which Katie will drop both of those in the chat, but the links will be available on the upcoming slides as well. So yeah, I'm going to briefly demonstrate how to navigate these tools so that you can use them as an aid in developing your proposals. So this is the Prop 4 DAC SDAC tool. The link is written at the top of this slide, and it's also in the chat. It is also linked on the application template. So when you navigate to this webpage, you will see a map like this. In the top right corner, there's a search bar for you to input the address of your project. And once you hit search, the map will zoom in on that address. And the address you searched is represented by this circle icon. And to assess whether your project is in a DAC or SDAC, you'll reference the key that's on the left side of the map, which shows that severely disadvantaged communities are the yellow areas on the map. Disadvantaged communities are dark blue areas on the map, and the light blue areas of the map are not a disadvantaged community. You can see that the address I searched is within a disadvantaged community and is within 2 miles of a severely disadvantaged community, based on the scale that's provided on the map. We encourage you to use this tool as an aid to help you develop your project with the goal of providing meaningful and direct benefits to CWRGP priority communities. It's not merely to check a box that your project is in a DAC or in an SDAC, but rather to help you identify the priority communities you may want to target your restoration and educational opportunities to. This is the second tool. It is the Vulnerable Communities Platform Climate Vulnerability Map, which shows you, which allows you to see the climate change related impacts such as wildfire, extreme heat, flooding, sea level rise, and drought. See how they are expected to affect California communities. This tool will be helpful to determine what climate change impacts your project site and surrounding communities are most vulnerable to, so you can consider whether the restoration activities you're proposing may help communities address or adapt to these impacts. Like the previous tool, the search bar is in the top right corner. You will type in your project address here and click search. The map will zoom in on the address you searched, and there'll be a circle icon to show you exactly where the location is. At the top of the map, you can select the hazard that you want to consider for your project. In this example, I searched the address of a dune restoration project, which is right on the coast. So I've selected sea level rise as the hazard to view vulnerability to. On the left-hand side of the map is the key. It is a color matrix of social vulnerability increasing from left to right, and climate hazard vulnerability increasing from bottom to top. So the least vulnerable communities, considering these factors, are shown as light pink on the map, and the most vulnerable communities are those represented in the very dark purple color. You can also select a time frame of now or in 2050. Again, we encourage you to use this tool as an aid to help you develop your project with the goal of providing meaningful and direct benefits to CWRGP priority communities. And there's more information about these tools on their respective platforms if you want more information about them. Okay. Handing it back to Helen.
Thanks. Okay, so next we have the project narrative. It has 13 sections that you'll need to complete, so it's a hefty lift, but we wanted to walk you through it. The template itself has detailed instructions on how to answer each question, but for now we'll just go through them and I'll add some additional context. The very first thing you'll do is identify which of our program priorities your project is aligned with. This section simply lists the 4 priorities that we talked about earlier, and then it asks that you check them off if your project addresses them. So we don't just consider how many the project will address, but also how well the project meets each of the priorities. So that's what's going to be considered by the selection committee. So I strongly encourage you to consider these priorities as you're designing your projects. Make sure you explain the need of the project. Okay, why are you doing it? Describe the specific problems, issues, or unserved needs that the project addresses. And then we also need a site description. So describe the site characteristics and include who owns and manages the site location. The project description is the bulk of your application. This one's 1 to 2 pages, this section. So we encourage you to tell us the story of your project, and please don't answer in bullet points. So describe the goals, objectives, and expected benefits of the project. Describe how restoration efforts will increase wetland acreage or enhance existing eligible habitat. Provide a description of the restoration methods, including the use of best available science or practices if applicable. For example, science used in design, implementation, or evaluation. And describe how the project will meet each of the priorities you selected. We also want you to highlight the communities your project is engaging. This section is broken down into 3 subsections that should be answered individually. First, describe any core priority community or communities the project will engage. You can use the mapping tools that we put in the chat earlier and that Nina described. We also want you to describe the relationship the project team has with priority communities that they're working with. So we're looking for meaningful engagement here. So we want to know if the project is being led or co-led by an organization that is led or primarily serves members of the queer community. If not, how is your project planning to engage communities in meaningful ways? So some examples of how we've seen this in the past in projects is by ensuring partners have decision-making power in the project or providing workforce training or paid internships. We've also seen large organizations that have a higher capacity apply for the bulk of the grant or apply for the grant, but include smaller organizations as subgrantees that receive the bulk of the funding, like the Buena Vista Lagoon project that Nina highlighted earlier. And lastly, we ask you in that section to describe any challenges or difficulties the community faces in accessing the area to be restored or enhanced. Project readiness lets us know how close you are to being ready for implementation. Demonstrate that it will be ready to start in the project timeline as a good way to go. I want to make sure that projects are going to happen soon. Part 7, it has a table where you list permits your project requires, if any, and then what their respective status is. Here are some permits that can come up as a part of your restoration work. Katie is throwing a link to a great resource for permits from Sustainable Conservation, listing out many common permits, who gives them out, and the type of project that needs them. That's about to go in the chat. This can be confusing. I think this is a point that a lot of folks have trouble with in our application and in developing their projects. So please reach out to us if you have questions. We're happy to help with figuring out what permits you might need and connecting you with the right people to see if your project needs any additional permits in order to do your project. And similarly for 8, which is for the California Environmental Quality Act, we want to know if your project is under CEQA. So this is another one where if you have a question on it for your project, don't hesitate to reach out to us to discuss. A lot of core projects end up being exempt from CEQA for a variety of reasons. The most common one is there's an exemption for any restoration project under 5 acres. So sometimes that's usually what happens, but if you want to discuss it, just to be sure, we are happy to talk about CEQA all the day long. Not all the day long. I don't actually want to talk about it all day, but I will with you. Okay, number 9 is specific tasks. This is a table for you to fill out what tasks will take place under your project, along with a brief description of them, what deliverables you will give us to show that you did the task, and a little peek into your anticipated project timeline. 10 is how you plan to measure success. We want to know both about how you'll measure success of restoration as well as the success of outreach. So please include what metrics or tools you plan to use to measure success. Ecologically, this could be something like species survival counts of plantings. For outreach, this could be volunteer counts or a survey done with teachers of classrooms that projects partnered with, things like that. 11, we want you to list out your partnerships and collaborations. This likely will have already come up in the project description, hopefully, but we want to spot specifically where we can just look and be like, oh, this is everyone they're working with. So we can easily see a list of that and who's doing what. And then we have tribal engagement. We encourage that projects communicate, consult, or engage with tribes traditionally and culturally affiliated to the project area throughout the development and implementation of the project. Coastal Conservancy will also be initiating consultation requests with tribal governments for any selected projects prior to recommending the project for funding to our board. Please don't say you're partnering with a tribe or tribal organization if they haven't already agreed to work with you on the project. If for some reason you're waiting to secure funding to reach out, you just need to make that clear in your application so we understand what level your partnership is at when we're having conversations with tribes. Again, though, we really strongly encourage applicants to communicate with tribes as early as possible. And lucky number 13 is a question about applicant experience and capacity. So both with managing grants and then maybe with running similar projects. Back to Nina.
Okay, so the third section of the application template is the project budget. We have included a budget task table for you to fill out, which is on the right side of this slide. This table is where you're going to break down your proposed budget based on specific project tasks, which you identify in the project narrative and in question 9. You can add or remove rows as necessary, depending on how many tasks your project has. CWRGP funding can support a range of activities, but please note that organizational capacity, workforce development, and project planning and development activities must not be more than 50% of the total funding amount that you request. And these activities must be related to the restoration project activities. In the section following the table, we also ask you to complete a budget task narrative and a budget justification for how you determine certain costs. We also ask you to share any other funding or in-kind support that this project has. In-kind support is non-monetary support, such as volunteer labor or donated food or supplies. I have made an example budget for a hypothetical project with the table and each of the following sections filled out. That is linked in the budget section of the application template, and I hope that it will be helpful to reference as you, if you're confused about how to answer any of the questions related to budget. And here is the budget task table that is included in that budget example, which is again linked in the budget section of the template. The italicized characters in this example are all things that you will adjust for your project. But as you can see in this table, the total funding requested for CWRGP is $90,000, but this project has $50,000 from another funding source, which brings the total project cost to $140,000. Also, a note about the row for indirect costs. You can determine whatever indirect cost rate is appropriate for your organization. However, this cost cannot exceed 20% of the total value of the grant. And the final section of the application template is for attachments. This refers to additional documents or photos that you should include, such as a regional and site scale map that shows the location of project elements. And you can include 1 to 3 photos of the project that provide more detail as to what the project site looks like. In addition, nonprofit applicants should include the following with the applications: a letter of determination from the Internal Revenue Service indicating current IRS 501c3 status, as well as a completed nonprofit organization pre-award questionnaire. If you have submitted this questionnaire in the past 2 years, you don't need to resubmit it this year. And just as a reminder, don't include attachments that aren't listed here, please. We will ask for letters of support for selected projects before we take our recommendation to our board. And electronic submissions of complete applications must be emailed to me by 5 p.m. on August 1st. All files should be uploaded as a single file in Microsoft Word or converted to PDF file. Please name the file by the project name and make sure the files are not excessively large. I know it can be nerve-wracking to wonder if it was received, so you should receive a confirmation that your application was received within 3 business days. If you have not heard from me by then, but please feel free to reach out. If electronic submission is not possible for you, we do accept hard copy applications. That must be postmarked by August 1st and sent to me at the address that's in the application guidance document. And if possible, please notify me via email to expect this hard copy. And finally, here again is an overview of the grant process. So what you can expect after August 1st. You'll hear from us about our decisions in September, whether you're awarded or not. And from there, we will be preparing a staff recommendation and presentation and asking for letters of support to bring to our December board meeting. And post-board meeting, if you would like more information about the grantee process, you could look at our grantee manual. If your project is awarded, you'll be assigned a Coastal Conservancy project manager who will work with you to get started to be able to receive the funding. If you're curious, might be too much information at this point, but the grantee manual link will be dropped in the chat for your reference. And please, again, don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions as you start your applications. And just a reminder that if you're unsure, if your project meets our requirements, or if you have questions specific to your project, you can send me a 1 to 2 paragraph description of your project or request a consultation with me prior to completing and submitting the application. Also, our CWRGP website has lots of additional information, as well as a project board that has information about projects in the past. And we'll drop the link to our page one more time in the chat. So we have time for questions. So please use the Q&A feature or the chat, either one, to submit your questions. And we're happy to answer any that you have.
Okay.
I think I saw questions come in as we were talking.
Yeah. So hello, David. Can research that is directly applied to and aims to support a restoration project be partially supported by this grant? If so, to what extent? What percent of the requested grant amount? Yeah, I think if it's directly applicable and has, could support the restoration directly, I think so. We would need to send us an email because then we can try to figure out the best answer for percentage. Definitely the bulk of the funding needs to be going towards both educational and the restoration components. So the direct outreach and restoration. So if it's a smaller bucket than that, it should be fine. But yeah, if you have further questions about that, David, please reach out. We'd love to talk about that. That sounds cool.
Okay, Abigail is asking about retrofitting 40-acre infiltration basin adjacent to Santa Clara, the Santa Clara River, I assume. Um,
I think we need more information. So
yeah,
I think I don't know if the Q&A is the right time for us to discuss it. So Abigail, please reach out to us with a question. If you want to send Nina a description with more information, we can get back to you. And if we want to have a meeting about it, we definitely can. Sounds like a very cool project. I don't know if this is the right funding source, but it could be. Just need more
yeah,
info.
definitely. Abigail, you can send me an email and then we can chat further as well. Oh, that's a
Okay.
neat idea, Nick, to set an out of office response that says, I received this email. Yeah, I can definitely do that. I'm sure I'm sure that would be super helpful for people applying last minute.
Okay, does this project have to occur within a disadvantaged or severely disadvantaged community, or was it within a certain mileage? That is such a good question, Jason. The the guidance we received from Pot 4 does not say it has to occur within, so you could definitely have a project, and we have many successful projects that were successfully awarded this funding last year, which is also Prop 4, that were not within the DAC or SDAC community, but they did serve folks who were from those communities. Um, if you have good justification, like if you're bringing folks, who live outside into an area that's not a DAC or SDAC, just provide that information. But yeah, that's a good question. Our guidance for giving out this funding was there's not a certain mileage. It's within, like, we're able to make that determination. So if you provide us good evidence and good backup information about why that makes sense, then that's good enough for me. Does this program, and Nick, does this program prioritize communities facing sea level rise impacts over the other impacts that you can filter on the Prop 4 mapping tool? Another great question. Yes, I think just naturally from it being focused on wetlands, that's going to be the general bend towards vulnerable communities. So I think in general, that's just going to naturally be the bias is towards sea level rise, vulnerable projects.
Yeah, but Kellen, would you say
Yeah.
that projects maybe further up the watershed,
Mm,
doing more riparian corridor restoration, um, there could be other climate risks that you're addressing with that work
absolutely.
that you can justify in your proposal. So yeah, just the nature of coastal wetlands, it is typically sea level rise, but not not always. Some cases
Yeah.
can be other hazards. Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't automatically take your project out if your project serves a DAC or an SDAC or is in a DAC or an SDAC, but doesn't necessarily fall within the vulnerable communities population section. So, don't try to fit your project into that if it doesn't work. Just give us the information that you have. It doesn't necessarily take you out of the running. It's just another way we're evaluating the populations that are being served by this project, by your project. If construction and restoration is wrapping up in early 2027, though community engagement is continuing along with maintenance and monitoring, is the project ineligible? Good question, Kelsey. I think it would be ineligible just because the restoration needs to be a part of what the funding from this grant program is going towards. So there would need to be restoration that is being funded by this project. Is there a matching
Um,
requirement? Oh, sorry. Go
yeah.
ahead, Nina.
No,
Go
it's
ahead.
okay. That's what I
You
was
go.
going to read off too. Um, the answer to that is no, right, Kellen?
That's correct.
There's no match requirement for this. So yeah, there's no requirement to have additional funding. But we just like to know if you do.
It's always good to see other funding coming in, but some of these projects are pretty, they're small enough that this grant source is covering everything. So we understand if there's not additional funding for it. Okay, how much restoration needs to be directly funded by this grant? For example, we would like to seek funding for community engagement, education, and events, which may include some restoration, but the heavy lifting of restoration is already completed or mostly funded. I think, sorry, my brain is thinking and then I don't talk. I think that I would like to know more particulars about your project. We definitely need, like, those outreach and activity events need to be connected directly to restoration work. So if there are components of the restoration that you wait to do with the community, and are able to bring the community into that kind of work. So, removing non-natives and installing natives, and you do those as planting days and have education associated with that. I could maybe see that working, but I think we would need more details. So Kelsey, please email us with some more information.
And Michael is asking about the grant agreement protection. 5, 10, 15 years of project protection after the grant closes. Um, that is just a legal requirement that we have with our grant agreements to ensure that the project is maintained for an appropriate amount of time after the grant closes. So we can discuss as if your project is selected, we can discuss what an appropriate timeline would be for your organization to keep what you did at that site there for X number of years. So that's what that was for.
Yeah, it's a state requirement for prop funding just to make sure that we're not giving out taxpayer dollars to projects and then the next year it like turns into a parking lot. So it's just a way for us to have that in writing that if there's going to continue to be the site, a restored site, and then we'll come out and monitor it periodically just to be like, yep, there was restoration that happened there. But like I mentioned, we can work with you to figure out what term makes the most sense depending on your project. Awesome, thanks. Okay, Dulce Cortez, hello. Will Corp fund the continuation of a project previously funded by Corp? Sure. Yeah, give us the info. We'd love to hear about what work you've done and what work you want to continue. Okay, I'm not seeing
We have
that
one
respond button.
from Tara. Would a blue-green infrastructure project that includes restoration be considered? Think removing concrete stormwater infrastructure from creeks and grading to improve hydrologic function of creek with wetland restoration. Help communities resilient to increase flood events. I think we would need to know a little bit more information, but it sounds a little bit large, maybe for um, for this grant program, removing concrete infrastructure. Unless that's potentially done and then this community comes in and does some restoration at the site. But yeah, I would say reach out to us with a little bit more information about what you're thinking about the community restoration part, and we can chat some more.
Yeah, be curious with how you will incorporate the community into the restoration there, which good point, Nina. It could be after things are taken out. But yeah, I know we said it 10,000 times, but we really do want you to reach out and talk to us about your projects. We love hearing about them. We want to make sure people aren't taking time to fill out an application if their project isn't the right fit. We know, applications do take a lot of time. So I want to give you any kind of information before you embark on that process. So please do utilize us as resources to help you figure out if you are eligible for this funding.
Okay, Jason is asking if any previous projects have been funded for vernal pool restoration.
My gut says yes. And we do list it as eligible habitat type.
Yes.
So if you have a vernal pool that you want to restore, please let us know.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know the project off the top of my head. Maybe Nina does, but not in the time since I've been working on this since 2022. But vernal pools are great.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think there has been several years ago. Yeah, vernal pools are awesome. More people need to know about vernal pools.
There is
Yes.
a chance, Jason.
There is a chance. You're welcome.
Okay, we'll give it a couple more minutes if folks have some questions that come up. I know we threw a lot of info at you. This is not a limited time offer to give feedback. So we appreciate you taking your lunch hour to listen to us talk for a very long time. And we're excited about the work that you all are doing in Southern California. All right, we'll give you guys a few minutes. Thanks again. Need anything else, or are we good?
I think we're good.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. Excited to talk to you about your projects. Bye.
Bye.